Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ida Khan. Welcome back to Medico's Guide. Today we'll be carrying out a detailed discussion and an examination of various types of reflexes found in our body. So let's have a look at the objectives that we are going to cover in this lecture. We are going to discuss about the definition, introduction, mechanism of reflexes, the different types of reflexes that are superficial reflexes based on spinal nerves, superficial reflexes based on cranial nerves, deep reflexes based on spinal nerves, and deep reflexes based on cranial nerves, then visceral or autonomic reflexes, sphincteric reflexes, grading of reflexes, pathophysiology, abnormal reflexes, clinical significance of reflexes, tendon reflex versus stretch reflex, and we will also be discussing about the Jindrasik maneuver. Let's first talk about the definition of reflex or reflex action. So, reflex or reflex action is an involuntary or automatic, unplanned action and nearly instantaneous movement to a stimulus. Reflexes are found with varying levels of complexity in organisms with the nervous system, and a reflex occurs via neural pathways in the nervous system called reflex arcs. We'll be discussing about reflex arc later in this video. And before we proceed, I have a humble request. If you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. Your support means a lot and it will truly motivate me to create more content for you. Also, if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear from you. Your feedback is always welcome and appreciated. Now, which reflex hammer are we going to use? A queen square neurological reflex hammer with pointed tip for superficial responses is preferred most of the times, as its flexibility allows us to apply just the right amount of force to elicit a response from those reflexes. Now let's dive into Introduction to Reflexes. It was first documented in 1875 by Wilhelm Heinrich Erb and Carl Friedrich Otto Westphal. The deep tendon reflexes play a vital role in the examination and diagnosis of neurological disorders. These reflexes, more accurately termed the muscle stretch reflex, are instrumental in assessing conditions affecting the afferent nerves, synaptic connections in spinal cord, motor nerves, and descending motor pathways. The presence of hyperreflexia or hyperreflexia is considered a definitive indicator of neurological dysfunction. Now let's dive into its mechanism. A reflex arc serves as the involuntary pathway through which tendon stimulation triggers a muscle response. This arc is classified as monosynaptic, involving only two neurons, a sensory neuron and a motor neuron, connected by a single synapse. The sensory neuron, originating in the dorsal root ganglion, that is DRG, innervates the muscle or Golgi tendon organ. On the other hand, the motor neuron, located in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, initiates the efferent response. The process begins within the muscle spindle, a proprioceptive organ sensitive to muscle stretch. Comprising intrafusal fibers, the muscle spindle is embedded within the muscle and surrounded by a connective tissue capsule. Upon muscle stretch, the spindle detects changes in the length, activating 1A afferent sensory fibers that transmit signals to spinal cord. Here, they monosynaptically stimulate alpha motor neurons, initiating muscle contraction via glutamate neurotransmission. This contraction resists the initial stretch, leading to reflex extinguishment, that is, decrease in reflex response. Now, during the reflex, the antagonist muscle undergoes inhibition while the agonist muscle contracts. Polysynaptic inhibition via the 1A inhibitory interneuron suppresses the alpha motor neurons to the antagonist muscles. For instance, in the knee jerk reflex, the hamstring muscles are inhibited, allowing the quadricep muscles to contract. Additionally, gamma motor neurons within the muscle spindle modulate intrafusal fiber sensitivity via acetylcholine release. Now let's talk about the first class of reflexes, that is superficial reflexes based on spinal nerves. Now let's move on to demonstration of our first reflex, that is plantar reflex. But first we are going to discuss about the pathway and the method to elicit this reflex. So the pathway is afferent pathway, tibial nerve, center L5S1, efferent pathway is by the tibial nerve as well. Now the method to elicit is bring the patient into supine position, gently scratch the outer border of the foot with the blunt object. From heel towards the little toe, then medially up to great toe at metatarsal level. And the response will be plantar flexion of all toes. Now, what is Babinski sign? This is a neurological reflex where the big toe bends upwards and the other toes fan out when the foot of the sole is stimulated. It can indicate upper motor neuron lesion or the damage to the central nervous system, such as the brain or spinal cord. But it can also be physiological, as it is seen in infants below 1 year of age because of the myelination that is occurring throughout the first year of life. Then it can also be physiological or normal during deep sleep and inhibition of the pyramidal tracts. Now, to assess the Babinski sign, use a blunt instrument such as the handle of a reflex hammer to stroke the sole of the foot from heel to the base of the toes. A normal response is for the toes to curl downwards, but an abnormal response in adults will be when the big toe extends upwards and the other toes fan out. Now let's move on to next reflex, that is abdominal reflex. It has a root value T7 to T12. Now it is divided into 3, so the upper abdomen has a root value T7 to T8, middle has T9 and T10, lower abdomen has T11 and T12. Now in order to elicit this reflex, bring the patient into supine position, abdomen will be uncovered and the muscles should be relaxed. Now stroke briskly but lightly in a medial direction across the upper and lower quadrant of the abdomen. The normal response is contraction of underlying muscle with the umbilicus moving laterally and up or down depending upon the quadrant tested. Now the next reflex is scapular reflex. It has a root value C5 to T1. It is assessed by stroking skin in the interscapular region and the response is the contraction of supra and infraspinatus muscle. Now, anal reflex, it has a root value S3 and S4. This is assessed by scratching the skin near the anus, and the response is contraction of anal sphincters. Now, cremasteric reflex, it has a root value L1 and L2. It is assessed by stroking the skin, that is upper and inner part of the thigh, and the response is the contraction of cremasteric muscle and the ascent of testes. Now, bulbocavernous reflex, it has a root value S3, S4. This is assessed by pinching the dorsum of the glans penis, and the response is the contraction of bulbocavernous muscle. Now, the next category of reflexes is superficial reflexes based on cranial nerves. The first reflex here is the ciliospinal reflex. First, let's talk about the pathway or the reflex arc. Afferent pathway C234, center T12, efferent pathway cervical sympathetic. Now, there are lots of other names for this reflex, and these are pupillary skin reflex, cutaneous pupillary reflex, pupillary reflex dilation, pupil dilation response, reflex pupillary dilation, cutaneous pupil reflex, or skin pupillary reflex. Ciliospinal reflex is characterized by rapid dilation of the ipsilateral pupil by 1 to 2 mm with a painful or startling stimulus. It is elicited by scratching or pinching over the skin at the side of the neck, upper trunk, and face. This reflex, which was first described by Birch, is present in normal awake or sleeping humans as well as in the comatose patients. The name denotes the involvement of ciliary body and the spinal cord. As the mediation of this reflex is by the cervical sympathetic fibers, it is absent in Horner syndrome. Now, the next reflex is conjunctival reflex. Corneal and conjunctival reflex both share the same pathway. Afferent pathway by the cranial nerve number 5, that is the trigeminal nerve. Center is in the pons, and the efferent pathway is by the cranial nerve number 7, that is the facial nerve. Now, this reflex is elicited by touching the conjunctiva with the cotton wool swab. Response is the contraction of orbicularis oculi muscle, due to which there is rapid closure of the eyelid. Now the next one is corneal reflex. Now as we have already discussed before that corneal and conjunctival reflex both share the common pathway. Now let's talk about how to elicit this corneal reflex. So touch the cornea with a cotton wool swab at its conjunctival margin and the response will be the contraction of orbicularis oculi muscle, that is rapid closure of the eyelid. Now next is the palatal reflex. Its afferent is carried by the ninth cranial nerve, which is a glossopharyngeal nerve, and the efferent by the 10th cranial nerve, that is a vagus nerve. Now this reflex is elicited by tickling the back of the pharynx with the swab stick, and the response is the reflex contraction of the palatal muscles. Now let's discuss about another category of the reflexes, that is deep reflexes based on cranial nerve. Now here there is only one reflex, and that is the jaw jerk, and this is controlled by the afferent pathway, that is cranial nerve number 5, that is trigeminal nerve, then the center is in the pons, and the efferent pathway is again the trigeminal nerve. Now, in order to elicit this jerk, slightly open the mouth and place one finger over the chin and tap it. The response will be the closure of the jaw due to the contraction of masseter muscle. Now, the next category is deep reflexes based on spinal nerves. So, the first reflex here is a bicep jerk. Now, the pathway is afferent pathway, musculocutaneous nerve, center is C5-6, and the efferent pathway is also musculocutaneous nerve. Now, in order to elicit this reflex, elbow is flexed to the right angle, semi-prone forearm, place a thumb or index finger on the bicep tendon, and strike with the clinical hammer. The response is the contraction of bicep muscles. Now, the next reflex is supinator jerk, that is also referred to as brachioradialis jerk. Now, here the pathway is afferent pathway, radial nerve, center is C5-C6, and the efferent pathway is also radial nerve. Now, in order to assess this reflex, elbow is flexed to the right angle, semi-prone forearm, put thumb or index finger on the brachioradialis tendon upon the styloid process of radius and strike with the clinical hammer. The response is supination of forearm. Now, the next reflex is tricep jerk. Here the pathway is afferent pathway radial nerve, center C6-C7, efferent pathway radial nerve. Now, this is assessed by support the patient's forearm by resting on the forearm of the examiner, with the arm midway between flexion and extension. The triceps insertion should be located on the olecranon, tap just above the insertion, and this is a response that there is extension of the forearm due to contraction of triceps muscle. Now, the next jerk is knee jerk, which is also referred to as patellar jerk or the quadriceps femoris jerk. Now, here the pathway is afferent pathway femoral nerve, center L2, L3, L4, efferent pathway femoral nerve as well. Now, how to elicit knee jerk? In a sitting position, legs should be relaxed and in the hanging position at the side of the bed, and the foot shouldn't touch the ground. Now, strike the patellar tendon midway between its origin and insertion, and the response will be extension of the knee due to contraction of quadriceps femoris muscle. Now, another reflex is ankle jerk, which is also known as gastrocnemius and soleus jerk or HS tendon reflex. Now, here the pathway is afferent pathway tibial nerve, center is S1-S2, and the efferent pathway is tibial nerve. Now, this reflex is assessed by, in a sitting position, the legs should be relaxed, and in the hanging position at the side of the bed, foot shouldn't touch the ground. Hold the foot in slightly dorsiflex position. Now, strike the tendon on its posterior surface. The response will be plantar flexion due to contraction of gastrocnemius, that is calf muscle. Now, finger jerk. Finger jerk has a root value C8. In order to assess this jerk, ask the patient to rest their fingers on index and middle fingers of your left hand and curl their fingers slightly. Now, strike your fingers, and the normal response will be the flexion of fingers. Next category is visceral or autonomic reflexes. Here we'll be discussing about the types of visual reflexes. The first one is direct pupillary light reflex. Now, the pathway is afferent, second cranial nerve, that is the optic nerve, center is midbrain, and the efferent is third cranial nerve, that is the oculomotor nerve. Now, in order to assess this reflex, pass light rays with a torch in one eye and see the pupil reaction in same eye. The response will be constriction of pupil. The second subtype is indirect pupillary light reflex. Here, the pathway is exact same, but the method is a bit different. Here, pass light rays with a torch in one eye and see pupil reaction in opposite eye. So, the reaction will be constriction of pupil in the opposite eye. Now, another reflex is accommodation reflex. The pathway is afferent, second cranial nerve, center is occipital cortex, and the efferent is third cranial nerve. Now, tell your subject to focus visual axis on a distant object. Put your finger in front of his or her nose and tell them to see it. And the response will be Number 1, increase in anterior curvature of lens due to contraction of ciliary muscle. Number 2, constriction of the pupil due to contraction of sphincter pupillae muscle. And number 3 is convergence of visual axis due to contraction of medial rectus muscle. Now, moving on to the last class of reflexes, that is the sphincteric reflexes. So the first one here is the swallowing, or which is also known as degradation reflex. Now this reflex is crucial for moving food or liquids from the mouth to the esophagus without choking. It involves a coordinated sequence of muscle contractions in the mouth, throat, and esophagus triggered by the presence of food or liquid in the mouth. The reflex begins voluntarily but becomes involuntary once initiated, allowing for the safe passage of the swallowed material into the digestive tract. Now, how to carry out the observation? So, the examiner observes the patient's ability to swallow various textures of food and liquids. Gag reflex. The examiner may stimulate the back of the throat to evoke the gag reflex, which is a protective mechanism related to swallowing. Now, the next is anal sphincter reflex or defecation reflex. This reflex controls the release of feces from the rectum through the anus. When the feces accumulate in the rectum, stretch receptors in the rectal walls send signals to the spinal cord, triggering a reflexive relaxation of the internal anal sphincter. Now, this relaxation allows the feces to move into the anal canal, where conscious control, that is, voluntary defecation, can occur if appropriate. Now, how to carry examination? Number 1, digital rectal examination (DRE). The examiner inserts a lubricated, gloved finger into the patient's rectum to assess the tone of internal anal sphincter and to detect any abnormalities in the rectal wall or anal sphincter function. Number 2, assessment of bowel function. The examiner may also inquire about the patient's bowel habits and any difficulties with defecation. Now, the last reflex here is the micturition reflex. Now, this reflex is also known as the urination reflex. This reflex controls the emptying of the bladder. When the bladder fills with urine, stretch receptors in the bladder wall send signals to spinal cord, which then triggers the micturition reflex. This reflex causes the detrusor muscle in the bladder wall to contract while simultaneously relaxing the internal urethral sphincter, allowing urine to flow from the bladder into the urethra. The external urethral sphincter, under voluntary control, can then be relaxed to allow urination. Now, how to examine this? Number 1, bladder ultrasound. In some cases, bladder ultrasound may be used to assess the bladder volume and function. Number 2, assessment of urinary function. The examiner may ask the patient about the urinary habits, including frequency of urination, urgency, and any difficulties with urination. Now, let's discuss grading of reflexes. The grading scale that is used for scoring reflexes was provided by National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, that is NINDS, in 1993. This is a standard scale for evaluating deep tendon reflexes. This scale has been validated and is universally accepted. Now, the grading of this scale is as follows. At grade 0, reflex is absent. At grade 1, reflex is small or less than normal. It includes a trace response or a response brought out only with reinforcement. At grade 2, reflex is in the lower half of a normal range. At grade 3, reflex is in the upper half of the normal range. At grade 4, reflex is enhanced, it's more than normal, and it includes clonus if present, which optionally can be noted in an edit, a verbal description of the reflex. Now, in some instances, a plus sign positive is written after a number. When discussing DTRs, adding or omitting a plus sign doesn't change the meaning of a reflex grade observed. Now, what is normal typically depends on the patient's history and past documented reflex grade. Abnormality is suggested when asymmetric reflexes are found. Once the examiner obtains a reflex on one side, they should test the same reflex on the opposite side for comparison. Now, let's talk about the pathophysiology of reflexes. Now, the pathophysiology of the reflexes can be hypoactive, hyperactive, or areflexia. Now, let's first discuss about the hyperactive deep tendon reflexes. Now, hyperactive deep tendon reflexes often indicate upper motor neuron lesions. Pathologically, these reflexes may manifest as an early sign of corticospinal tract abnormalities or suprasegmental lesions affecting the reflex arc. Conversely, hypoactive or absent reflexes are associated with lower motor neuron lesions. occurring in conditions such as hypothyroidism, hypothermia, or cerebellar dysfunction. Now, if the reflexes are absent and there is also a presence of sensory loss, this indicates the involvement of afferent arc. While if there is paralysis, fasciculations, and muscle atrophy with absent reflexes, this indicates the involvement of efferent arc, that is, efferent arc lesions. Peripheral neuropathy, commonly caused by conditions like diabetes or alcoholism, is a frequent cause of areflexia. Now let's move on to abnormal reflexes. There are three types of abnormal reflexes: Babinski sign, pateloclonus, and enkelclonus. We have already discussed about the Babinski sign in the early part of this video. Now, before discussing about the pateloclonus or enkelclonus, we should know what is clonus basically. Clonus is a rhythmic oscillating stretch reflex. The cause of the oscillations are related to lesions in upper motor neurons and is generally accompanied by hyperreflexia. Therefore, the clonus is used as a part of neurological physical exam to assess the status of patient's nervous system. Now let's first discuss about the pateloclonus. This is an abnormal reflex where repeated involuntary contractions of quadricep muscle occur in response to sustained stretching of patellar tendon. It's often seen in neurological conditions such as spinal cord injury or certain types of brain damage. Now, how to assess patellar clonus? To assess the clonus, support the limb being tested, that is, the leg for the patellar clonus, and extend the knee, causing a stretch in the respective tendon. If clonus is present, rhythmic contractions of muscles will be felt, indicating an abnormal response. Now, the last one is ankle clonus. Similar to patellar clonus, ankle clonus is an abnormal reflex characterized by rhythmic contractions of the calf muscles when the foot is dorsiflexed. It's also associated with neurological conditions affecting the spinal cord or brain. Now, abnormal reflexes can be exaggerated or hyperactive, that is seen in the thyrotoxicosis, upper motor neuron lesions, anxiety, nervousness, and tetanus. They can be diminished or absent in cases of lower motor neuron lesions or if the subject is watching it or during sleep. Or a pendular reflex can be observed in the cerebellar lesions. Now let's talk about the clinical significance of the reflex assessment. Deep tendon reflexes serve as a valuable tool in assessing motor system integrity, with hypoactive or absent reflexes indicating lower motor neuron involvement and hyperactive reflexes suggesting upper motor neuron lesions. In chronic cases, spasticity may lead to clonus, which is often observed in conditions such as stroke or cerebral palsy. Identifying the laterality of reflexes aids in localizing lesions within the nervous system. Furthermore, assessing reflexes can be crucial in monitoring patients receiving magnesium infusions, as loss of reflexes can indicate magnesium toxicity, necessitating immediate cessation of infusion. Now, what is the difference between tendon reflexes and stretch reflexes? The deep tendon reflex, also known as stretch reflex or myotatic reflex, involves both the stretch action and muscle response. Some experts differentiate between the two reflexes, arguing that tendon reflex is triggered by tapping the tendon after active stretching, while the stretch reflex responds to passive stretching during posture and movement. The tendon reflex is characterized by a short latency response, whereas the stretch reflex exhibits a longer latency period. Now let's talk about our last heading, that is Jindrasik maneuver or enforcement. When testing lower extremity reflexes such as patellar or ankle reflex, if no visible response is initially observed, the examiner may use the Jindrasik maneuver. This maneuver consists of patient clenching their teeth, flexing their elbows, and tightly interlocking both sets of fingers. The patient is instructed to pull their hands apart while keeping them interlocked. This maneuver causes voluntary upper motor neuron innervation, that is, increase in the excitability of motor neurons, which counters some of the descending inhibition sent by the brain to lower motor neuron reflex arc. It also prevents conscious inhibition of reflex by the patient, as they focus more on the maneuver and less on the examiner. And that wraps up today's video. Feel free to ask any questions related to this topic in the comments section below. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any new videos. If you enjoyed my video, Don't forget to like and share it with your friends. See you in the next video. Until then, take care.